Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a stubborn HOA queen dares to cross the wrong neighbor, a petty parking feud spirals into an all-out suburban war, complete with bricks, betrayal, and a courtroom showdown. This isn't just about a garage. It's about power, revenge, and the price of messing with the wrong man. It was just another Tuesday evening, and I was dead tired after a long day of meetings and logistics calls. I'm Eric Holt, 39, systems engineer, homeowner, and, as I was about to find out, the newest mortal enemy of Karen Drake, the self-appointed tyrant of Maple Run HOA. The funny part, I don't even live in Maple Run. My property sits right outside the official boundaries, on unincorporated land that's been in my family for years. Still, that never stopped Karen from acting like she owned the air I breathed. That day, I was driving home like usual, taking the same route through the neighborhood because, frankly, the streets were smoother than the county roads. As I approached a four-way stop, I noticed a familiar white Lexus SUV rolling toward the intersection from the right. It was Karen. Even from a distance, you could tell by that aggressive inching that she wasn't planning to actually stop. And she didn't. She blew past the sign like she was late for a ceremony honoring her own ego. I braked hard to avoid a collision, honking instinctively. She slammed her brakes in the middle of the road, rolled down her window, and shouted something I couldn't fully catch over my music, though I'm pretty sure the word respect was in there. I raised an eyebrow, shook my head, and kept driving. No gestures, no yelling back. I figured she'd huff and puff her way home, and that'd be the end of it. How wrong I was. The next morning, I stepped out with my coffee, ready to load up the truck and head to the hardware store. Instead, I froze halfway down the steps. There, parked snugly across the double doors of my detached garage, was Karen's white Lexus. She hadn't just parked illegally, she had backed into the spot, her bumper a mere inch from the garage door. Perfect alignment. Purposeful. Like an exhibit in a petty museum of control. Taped to the windshield was a neon pink note, scrawled in bold permanent marker. Learn to respect your elders. Consider this a lesson, neighbor. I blinked. A lesson for following traffic laws, for not slamming my brakes into her passenger door the night before. I took a deep breath, looked around. No Karen in sight. Just her smug SUV and that insultingly cheerful pink note fluttering in the morning breeze. That's when I knew. It wasn't about the intersection. It was about control. And this little stunt. It was just the opening shot. I stood there for a full minute, coffee cooling in my hand, just staring at the absurd sight of her car barricading my garage like some suburban act of warfare. Most people would have called the police, maybe left a strongly worded note, maybe tried knocking on her door. But I've been around long enough to know Karen wouldn't respond to reason. She'd see it as a win. And I wasn't about to play by her script. Instead, I made a few calls. One to Mason, a contractor friend of mine who owed me a favor, one to a local masonry supply shop, and one to a guy who could haul over a portable fence. By noon, the supplies were on site: bricks, mortar, a few steel rods. We unloaded them quietly, efficiently. Mason didn't ask too many questions, just grinned when I explained what we were building. By 1 p.m., a small team was at work under the scorching sun, laying the first row of bricks carefully around Karen's precious Lexus. I had them build a perimeter tight enough to enclose the car on all sides, with 2 inches of clearance to spare. We left narrow ventilation slits because I'm not a monster. We even poured a smooth concrete slab over the top like a makeshift roof, sealed in place with reinforcing bars. 6 hours later, it was done. Her vehicle now sat entombed in a solid red brick cell, as if it had been plucked from a post-apocalyptic art exhibit. On the front-facing side, in black paint across the middle layer of bricks, I had Mason stencil a message. If you think blocking others makes you powerful, try living inside your ego. The neighborhood was unusually quiet. A few people passed by, phones raised discreetly. I heard muffled laughter from behind a hedge. Let them talk, let them film. Then I went inside, packed a bag, turned off the exterior lights, checked the cameras, and headed for the airport. I had a week-long out-of-state site visit I couldn't reschedule, and frankly, it couldn't have come at a better time. My flight left at 10 p.m. As I pulled out of the driveway, I took one last look at the red brick sarcophagus squatting smugly over Karen's SUV. Lesson received, I muttered. Let's see how you enjoy being trapped. I wasn't gone more than 24 hours before the first video landed in my inbox. A neighbor, Tony, 2 doors down, sent it with no subject line, just the footage. I opened it in the hotel lobby, coffee in hand, half expecting to see Karen whining to a tow truck. Instead, I got something better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. There she was, in broad daylight, still dressed like she was headed to a HOA luncheon, khakis, polo, visor, swinging a full-size sledgehammer at the wall. Her movements were wild, inefficient. She hit the bricks like she was punishing them for existing, howling something I couldn't quite make out. My masons had done a fine job. The wall held strong for at least a dozen swings before she finally managed to loosen the corner. But she wasn't alone. 2 men showed up shortly after, mid-30s, sunburnt, the kind of guys who looked like they worked odd jobs for cash. No uniforms, no logos on their van, just muscle, cheap sunglasses, and bad judgment. One of them immediately began pulling bricks down while the other tossed chunks of rubble into the back of their vehicle. Karen stood behind them, directing traffic like she was supervising a demolition crew. According to Tony's timestamp, this happened barely a day after I left. I called my remote security system to check the feeds, only to find half of my exterior cameras were offline. A surge, I thought? No. They'd been yanked clean off the mounts. The front camera caught blurry movement before cutting to black. Backyard? Same deal. All that was left was my driveway feed, which thankfully caught what came next. By day 3, Karen's little militia had moved beyond the car. The wall was gone. Fine. But then they broke the side fence leading to my tool shed. The camera caught them forcing the gate with a crowbar. They ripped out my motion lights, tossed tools around like they were scavenging, and this is what made my blood boil, they entered the garage. And they didn't just enter, they destroyed it. Montage-worthy destruction. They smashed shelves, ripped wires from the walls, and worse. They sprayed expanding foam insulation inside, everywhere. Inside my fuse box, my breaker panel, inside drawers, storage bins, and across my motorcycle, which I'd just restored the month prior. A 1977 Yamaha XS650, my pride and joy. I'd just finished rewiring it, polishing the tank, redoing the leather seat. Now, the foam had hardened across the body like a cancer. One of the men was laughing. Karen stood in the background, arms folded, surveying it all like a general overseeing a siege. Tony messaged again. Thought you might want this. Figured it'd be useful when the cops come knocking. Also, holy hell, man. Another neighbor, Julia, sent a photo. Karen talking to someone near my mailbox, clearly bragging. She wrote, "She says she's teaching you consequences." Her words. I sat there in the hotel bar, stunned. This wasn't a petty grudge anymore. This was malicious destruction, trespassing, and a premeditated act of revenge. Karen had lost her mind, and when I returned, I'd make sure she finally lost her power too. I landed late Friday evening, dropped my bag in the hallway, and didn't even bother turning on the lights before walking straight to the garage. I knew what I was about to see, but nothing could have prepared me for the gut punch of standing there in person. The door hung crooked on its hinges, the keypad panel smashed like someone had taken a hammer to it. The inside, a war zone. Tools scattered across the floor, drawers pried open, bins overturned and emptied, shelves ripped from the walls. And then there was the foam. It clung to everything. Hardened blobs oozed from outlets, crusted over my workbench, filled the cabinets. The garage smelled faintly of chemicals and electrical burn. Some of the wiring had clearly shorted out. And there, under a layer of filth and hardened insulation, sat my Yamaha, frozen in place. The leather seat ruined, chrome muffled, engine casing smeared with yellow crust, like the bike had been left out in radioactive mud. I didn't speak, didn't move, just stood in the doorway for a full minute. The rage wasn't loud. It was cold, focused, burning steady like a pilot light under pressure. She'd crossed a line I didn't even know I had. I spent the next 2 hours walking the property with a flashlight, logging every bit of damage. The destroyed camera mounts, the footprints in the side yard, the ripped-out cabling near the shed, a missing shovel, a broken ceramic planter. Someone had even cracked the birdbath near the back deck. It was like she'd wanted to ruin everything, as if wrecking my things could somehow validate her power trip. At sunrise, I got to work. First call, the sheriff's department. A deputy arrived within the hour. I walked him through the damage, showed him Tony's video, and let him inspect the physical wreckage. He nodded slowly, mouth tight. "You got solid documentation," he said. "This ain't vandalism. This is felony territory. Second call, my insurance adjuster. Third, my attorney, Julie Nichols. Sharp, fast-talking, and absolutely lethal when she's angry. And right after that, I called someone I hadn't needed in years, a licensed private investigator named Glenn Beals, a retired cop who still had contacts in city code enforcement and the DA's office. Within a day, we had the beginnings of a full case file, witness statements, photo logs, multiple videos, timestamps. But the final nail came from an unexpected source, one of Karen's own contractors, the younger of the two guys who helped tear down the brick structure and storm my garage. Apparently, after realizing how serious the fallout might be, he got cold feet. Glenn tracked him down, showed him the legal risks, and suddenly the guy had a change of heart. He handed over everything: text messages, call logs, even a voice memo where Karen could be heard saying, "I don't care how you do it, just make sure the garage is unusable by the time he gets back. I'll pay you in cash." No paper trail. Game over. Julie was practically giddy. "We're not just pressing charges," she said. "We're going for blood, civil and criminal." And her HOA position? Toast. I looked out over my wrecked yard as the sun dipped low, throwing long shadows across the torn-up soil and broken stone. This wasn't just about Karen anymore. It was about drawing a line in the sand and making damn sure no one ever tried to cross it again. By Monday morning, my driveway looked like the set of a true crime docuseries. 2 unmarked vehicles from the county crime unit, a forensics van, and my attorney Julie pacing the lawn with a tablet in one hand and a vengeance-flavored latte in the other. The deputy returned with a warrant team to gather physical evidence: tool marks, fingerprints, boot impressions, the works. They even collected a chunk of hardened foam from the Yamaha's engine casing, Karen's signature, now sealed in polyurethane. Julie, meanwhile, was already in motion. She filed both a criminal complaint and a civil lawsuit in parallel. The civil case demanded restitution for property damage, stolen tools, destroyed equipment, and loss of use, including full replacement value of my motorcycle. The total estimate came to $112,000, but we weren't stopping there. She tacked on punitive damages, emotional distress, and attorney fees. That brought the grand total to just over $1 million. And then came the beautiful part. Julie had drafted an injunction request that would bar Karen from coming within 100 feet of my property or contacting me in any form. When she presented the text messages from Karen to the hired thugs, the court granted it immediately. Karen hadn't even been formally charged yet, but the judge saw enough to issue what Julie proudly called a legal muzzle. Glenn, the PI, worked his own angles. He cross-referenced Karen's HOA activity, her payment accounts, her communications with vendors. He found that she had authorized a bogus emergency landscaping order using her HOA credentials the same day my property was vandalized. She had billed the HOA for site remediation work that matched the date the men tore apart my yard, meaning not only did she orchestrate a criminal act, she tried to launder it through her HOA expense reports. That little detail transformed her mischief into fraud. When we passed this to the district attorney's office, they didn't hesitate. Karen was charged with criminal trespass, malicious destruction of property, conspiracy to commit vandalism, attempted insurance fraud, and misuse of HOA funds, each carrying real weight, not just slaps on the wrist. One of the charges, destruction with intent to cause financial harm, was classified as a felony. Karen naturally denied everything, publicly. Loudly. She even tried holding a press conference in her driveway, calling the charges baseless and a personal attack from a man with anger issues who built a prison around my car. Her voice trembled, though, and not from outrage. The camera flashes weren't from the local paper. They were from legal reporters covering what had suddenly become the HOA scandal of the year. Tony sent me a clip that night. Karen at the podium in a pastel blazer, sweating through her collar as someone shouted, "What about the text messages, Karen? Did you or did you not order the destruction of Mr. Holt's garage?" She stammered, denied, pivoted. But it was too late. The media had the scent. Julie smiled when I showed her. "Perfect. She wants to play this out in public? Great, because our evidence doesn't lie. And when this goes to court, it won't be the microphones she's facing. It'll be a judge and 12 very unimpressed jurors. We'd gathered everything. Now it was time to make her answer for all of it. The courthouse was packed. Locals filled the benches. HOA members sat stiffly on one side of the aisle, and a small swarm of local news crews clustered just outside the courtroom doors. It felt like the entire neighborhood had shown up, as if this trial had become more than just my battle. It was theirs too. Karen had ruled over Maple Run like a petty tyrant for years, and now, finally, someone was holding her accountable. Karen sat across the room at the defense table, lips pressed tight, wrapped in a suit a size too tight, and a confidence that had clearly started to crack. Her expensive lawyer, a gray-haired man with slicked back hair and a folder full of theatrics, whispered to her constantly, but even from where I sat, I could tell he was stalling, not strategizing. When the judge called the case, the opening statements hit like thunder. Julie stood up with calm fire, outlining everything, how a petty act of retaliation escalated into organized property destruction, how Karen used her position in the HOA to hide her involvement, and how she tried to spin it all as some twisted moral lesson. Then she paused, turned to the jury and said, "This isn't just about broken bricks or ruined tools. It's about what happens when someone abuses power so completely they forget their neighbors are human beings, not obstacles." Then came the parade of witnesses. Tony was first. He gave a clear, concise breakdown of what he saw and filmed, even playing the video of Karen swinging the sledgehammer for the entire courtroom. You could feel the ripple of disbelief as the footage played, as if people were just now realizing how far she'd really gone. Julia followed with screenshots of Karen bragging near my mailbox. Then the younger contractor, Jason, took the stand. Nervous at first, but when Julie handed him the printed text between him and Karen, his spine straightened. He read them aloud. The courtroom was dead silent when he hit the line. "I don't care how you do it. Just make sure the garage is unusable by the time he gets back." Karen's face drained of color. Her lawyer objected, claimed the texts were taken out of context, but the judge overruled. The evidence was direct, unfiltered. Julie brought in a property damage assessor who broke down every item lost or destroyed, from the wiring to the motorcycle, with hard numbers and insurance documentation. The total damages matched our claim to the dollar. But the turning point came with Glenn, the investigator. Calm, methodical, he laid out the HOA angle, showed invoices, payment approvals signed by Karen, emails where she labeled the illegal activity as urgent beautification efforts. It was fraud. Documented, systemic, and with her signature all over it. Karen's defense tried to counter with character witnesses, mostly other HOA board members she hadn't bullied, but none of them held up. One even cracked under cross-examination and admitted she'd been pressured to testify. By the time closing arguments came, Julie didn't even raise her voice. She just let the evidence speak. And then she turned to the jury and asked, "If this had happened to you, your garage, your car, your home, what would you want done? Would you let her walk away with a warning? Or would you expect justice?" I looked around the courtroom and saw something I hadn't expected. Nods from neighbors, from people who used to avoid eye contact, from those who once whispered their complaints. Now they were with me. Now they'd seen it. And now it was Karen's turn to answer. The jury deliberated for barely 4 hours. Honestly, I think they made their decision in the first 20 minutes and just spent the rest making sure the paperwork was neat. When they filed back into the courtroom that Friday afternoon, there wasn't a single hint of doubt in their faces, just quiet resolve. Karen shifted in her seat, tugging at her collar, trying to look composed. Her lawyer whispered something and got a curt nod in return. But her hands, those weren't steady anymore. Her fingers fidgeted, twisting the edge of her blazer sleeve into a tight coil. The foreperson stood up and read the verdict in a clear, unwavering voice. On the count of felony criminal mischief, guilty. On the count of conspiracy to destroy private property, guilty. On the count of fraud involving misuse of HOA funds, guilty. On all counts, we find the defendant guilty. Karen didn't move. For the first time in all of this, she didn't have a rebuttal or a scoff or an eye roll. She just sat there, staring at some point beyond the judge's bench like she was watching her reputation disintegrate molecule by molecule. Then came the sentencing. The judge didn't pull punches. He called her actions an appalling abuse of position and power, noting how she weaponized community authority for personal vendetta. He listed off the damage, the intentional deceit, the attempts to manipulate legal systems, and the sheer arrogance behind it all. You deliberately escalated a minor neighborhood incident into a campaign of destruction and intimidation, he said. Your conduct was malicious, entitled, and, frankly, embarrassing to the institution you represented. And just like that, Karen Drake, president of the Maple Run HOA, was sentenced to 1 year in state prison with eligibility for parole after 9 months, depending on restitution and good behavior. But that wasn't all. In the civil case, which the judge addressed immediately afterward, the jury awarded me the full $1,000 in damages. Between her insurance and personal assets, both of which Julie had already had liens prepped for, she'd be lucky to hang on to her car, assuming it was still functional after its time in the brick tomb. Karen's mouth opened as if to protest, but her lawyer gently touched her arm and shook his head. She knew she'd lost everything: her post, her status, her narrative. This wasn't just a defeat. This was an unmasking. As the bailiff approached, Karen stood slowly, hands trembling as the cuffs clicked into place. She looked around the room like she expected someone, anyone, to speak up for her. No one did. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. One stuck a mic in my face and asked, "Do you feel like justice was served today?" I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just answered calmly. "I feel like I parked my car in my own garage. That's all I ever wanted." A week after the verdict, my property was still half rubble and dust, but something had shifted, not just in the yard, but in the way the air felt. Lighter, like the place could finally exhale. The tension that had hovered around my home like a storm cloud for months had finally broken. I wasn't dodging threats, documenting tire tracks, or checking my cameras every 10 minutes. The war was over, and now it was time to rebuild. I hired a crew to tear down what was left of the vandalized structure and haul away the scarred remains of my tool shed and garage walls. Insurance covered most of it, thanks to the airtight evidence Julie helped submit. The Yamaha, however, that hurt the most. The frame was salvageable, but everything else, gone. I didn't have the heart to replace it just yet. For now, I kept it covered under a tarp, tucked in the corner, waiting for when I was ready to bring it back to life. In the meantime, I focused on making the space better than it had ever been. I upgraded the security system: motion cameras, glass break sensors, reinforced locks. I had the garage rebuilt from scratch, expanded by a few feet, and wired with smart lighting and ventilation. The walls gleamed with fresh paint, and the new workbench was custom-built, steel-framed, and bolted to the concrete. It was finally mine again, but I wasn't done. One morning, I drove down to a local metalworks shop and commissioned something special: a solid steel plaque, matte black with white laser-etched lettering. The guys didn't ask questions, just grinned when they read it. When it arrived, I mounted it right above the new garage doors. No lights, no fanfare, just 2 simple lines. "If you want to block my garage, make sure your insurance covers bricks and court dates. Karen Drake, 1 year behind bars for trying to mess with the wrong man." People noticed. Neighbors slowed down when they passed. Some waved, others gave thumbs up. A few even walked over to say things they'd never had the guts to say before, like how they'd been scared of Karen's power trips for years, how they'd gotten HOA citations for things like planting the wrong flowers or hanging flags a few inches too low. Now, they were organizing elections for a new HOA board, and not a single person from Karen's old circle had dared put their name forward. That weekend, I held a cookout. Nothing fancy. Just a grill, some lawn chairs, cold beer, and a few good people. Tony showed up with his kids. Julia brought pie. A few others I barely knew brought folding tables and asked where to help. For the first time in a long time, the place didn't feel like a target. It felt like a home. The plaque stayed there, of course. Not out of spite, but as a reminder that sometimes standing up for yourself isn't just about protecting your garage. It's about showing people that there's still a line that shouldn't be crossed. And if someone tries to cross it, well, I've got plenty of bricks left. A month after the trial, I got an email from a journalist with the local affiliate news station. The subject line read, "We'd love to hear your side of the story." My first instinct was to delete it. I wasn't looking to become some minor internet celebrity or turn my garage into a true crime landmark. But Julie Ever the strategist convinced me otherwise. "This is bigger than you," she said over coffee. "People need to see that HOA power abuse isn't untouchable. And besides, it'll set the record straight before Karen or her allies try to twist the narrative." So I agreed. They filmed the interview in my backyard. Simple setup: 2 chairs, a mic clipped to my collar, and the garage doors in the background, plaque fully visible. The reporter was young, professional, and, though he tried to hide it, clearly thrilled to be covering something other than zoning board meetings and weather alerts. He asked me how it all started, what made me decide to respond the way I did, and if I had any regrets. I told the truth. It wasn't about revenge, I said. It was about setting boundaries. I didn't go after her. She blocked me in, literally and legally. I just refused to let her keep doing it. They cut in footage of the infamous brick wall from Tony's videos, a slow pan across the empty spot where Karen's SUV once sat. Then the reporter asked the question I knew was coming. If you could say one thing to Karen Drake now, what would it be? I paused, thought about the garage, the motorcycle, the months of stress, but also the barbecue last weekend, the neighbors who started speaking again, the election flyers I'd seen popping up for a new HOA president. I looked straight into the camera and said, I hope you find peace. But next time you want to teach someone a lesson, maybe don't do it with a sledgehammer and stolen power. The segment aired that night. Within days, it spread across social media. The clip of the plaque above my garage racked up views faster than I could keep track. Someone turned it into a meme. Someone else printed it on a t-shirt. There was even a YouTube reaction video titled, Karen got bricked and jailed. Justice hits different. I didn't care about the fame, but the message. That landed. Emails poured in. People thanking me, telling me their own HOA horror stories. Some even asking for legal advice. Julie got a kick out of that. In the end, I didn't just rebuild my garage. I helped remind people that your home isn't just a structure. It's your line in the sand. And if someone tries to cross it, well, now they know what happens when they block the wrong garage.